Do you know that feeling when everyone thinks they know you, but they really don't know you at all? That was Rita Hayworth's entire life. Here's a woman who became one of the biggest movie stars in history, who had her picture plastered on bombs during World War II, who married princes and movie stars. But the whole time, she was trapped inside this image that Hollywood created for her. Rita Hayworth didn't start out as Rita Hayworth. She was born Margarita Carmen Cancino in 1918, and her story is way more complicated than most people realize. Her father was a Spanish dancer, and her mother came from the famous Ziegfeld Follies, so dancing and performing was literally in her blood. But here's the thing. From the time she was 12 years old, she was already being pushed into this world that would eventually destroy her sense of self. Her father made her his dance partner when she was just a kid. They performed in nightclubs and casinos, places where grown men would watch this young girl dance. And this is where it all started, this idea that Rita existed for other people's pleasure. She wasn't even a teenager yet, and already she was being looked at in ways that made her uncomfortable. When Hollywood discovered her in the 1930s, they took one look at this beautiful young woman with Spanish features and immediately started changing everything about her. They didn't like her name. Margarita Cancino sounded too ethnic for their taste. They didn't like her hairline. It was too low, they said. So they made her go through this painful process called electrolysis, where they literally burned away her hair follicles to give her a higher forehead. Can you imagine? They were physically changing her face because it didn't fit their idea of what a movie star should look like. They dyed her black hair red and gave her the name Rita Hayworth. Just like that, Margarita Cancino disappeared, and Rita would later say this was when she lost herself. She said she spent the rest of her life trying to live up to this person they created, this Rita Hayworth, who wasn't really her. But the worst part was still coming. In 1946, she starred in a movie called Gilda, and everything changed forever. In this movie, she played this seductive, mysterious woman who drove men crazy. There's this famous scene where she's wearing a black dress and long gloves, and she slowly peels off one of the gloves while singing. It doesn't sound like much now, but back then, it was considered incredibly sexy, maybe too sexy. The movie made her famous around the world, but it also trapped her. Suddenly, everyone saw Rita Hayworth as this sultry seductress. The press started calling her the love goddess. They acted like she was this irresistible woman who could make any man fall in love with her just by looking at him. And Rita absolutely hated it. Here's what people didn't understand. Rita was actually really shy in real life. She was insecure about her intelligence because she never got a proper education. She'd been working since she was a child, so she missed out on school and normal friendships. She was much more comfortable at home, reading books and taking care of her children, than she was being this glamorous movie star. But Hollywood had invested too much money in the Rita Hayworth image to let her be herself. They kept putting her in movies where she played the same type of character over and over, the beautiful woman who men couldn't resist. Every role was just a variation of Gilda, and with each movie, the gap between who she really was and who people thought she was got bigger and bigger. The love goddess thing became this curse that followed her everywhere. When she went out in public, men would expect her to be this confident, seductive woman from her movies. But that wasn't her at all. She once said something that breaks my heart. She said, "They go to bed with Gilda and wake up with me." Think about that. She felt like people only wanted the fake version of her, never the real person. This affected her relationships in the worst way. Rita was married 5 times, and every single marriage failed. Part of the problem was that the men who were attracted to her were usually attracted to the image, not the woman. They wanted to be with the love goddess, but when they got to know the real Rita, who was quiet and bookish and preferred staying home, they were disappointed. Her most famous marriage was to Prince Ali Khan. On paper, it seemed perfect, the Hollywood love goddess and the exotic prince. The media went crazy for it. But, in reality, it was a disaster. The prince was used to women who lived for parties and social events. Rita just wanted a quiet family life. She wanted to cook dinner and help her kids with their homework. The marriage lasted less than 4 years. Even her marriage to Orson Welles, who was supposed to be this brilliant artist who understood her, didn't work out. Welles was fascinated by the Rita Hayworth image too. He put her in his movie, The Lady from Shanghai, and actually cut off her famous red hair and dyed it blonde. It was like he was trying to destroy the image, but in doing so, He made her feel even more lost about who she really was. The saddest part is how this affected Rita's relationship with herself. She started believing that maybe the only valuable thing about her was her beauty and her ability to be sexy on screen. When reporters interviewed her, they rarely asked about her thoughts on anything important. They wanted to know about her love life, her beauty secrets, what it was like being a goddess. She began to feel like she had nothing interesting to say beyond what people expected from the love goddess. And as she got older, this became even more painful. In Hollywood, there's nothing worse than being a woman who's aging. The same studios that had created the Rita Hayworth image started losing interest when she hit her 40s. Suddenly, the love goddess wasn't goddess-like enough anymore. They wanted younger women who could fill that role. Rita tried to break free from the image several times. She took roles in more serious movies, trying to show that she could really act, not just look beautiful, but audiences didn't want to see her that way. They wanted Gilda. They wanted the love goddess. So the studios kept putting her back in the same type of movies. The pressure of living up to this impossible image took a huge toll on Rita's mental health. She started drinking heavily. She became more and more isolated. She would later say that she felt like a prisoner in her own life. Here was a woman who had everything that people thought they wanted: beauty, fame, money, success, and she was miserable. In the 1960s, Rita's behavior started becoming erratic. She would forget her lines on movie sets. She'd show up late or sometimes not at all. People in Hollywood started saying she was difficult, that she was a diva. But what they didn't know was that she was showing early signs of Alzheimer's disease. The woman, who had been forced to be perfect her whole life, was now struggling with a disease that was slowly taking away her memory and her ability to function. For years, no one understood what was happening to her. They just saw this former movie star who seemed to be falling apart. Rita's daughter later said that her mother would sometimes forget who she was supposed to be, Rita Hayworth or Margarita Cancino. The disease was taking away both versions of her identity. Rita spent her final years mostly out of the public eye. She died in 1987, and by then, most people remembered her only as this glamorous figure from old movies. The real woman, the one who loved to read, who was a devoted mother, who just wanted to be accepted for who she really was, that person had been buried under the love goddess image decades earlier. Looking back at Rita's story now, it's really tragic. She was incredibly talented, not just beautiful, but a skilled dancer and a better actress than people gave her credit for. But Hollywood in the 1940s and 50s didn't know what to do with complicated women. They wanted simple images that they could sell to audiences. So they took this complex, interesting person and turned her into a fantasy. The love goddess title that she hated so much wasn't really about love at all. It was about desire, about creating an image that would make money. Rita understood this better than anyone. She knew that people weren't really in love with her. They were in love with a carefully constructed image that had very little to do with who she actually was. What makes Rita's story even sadder is that it keeps happening. Even today, we see young women in Hollywood who get trapped by their image. They become known for one thing, usually their looks or their sexuality, and then they spend years trying to prove they're more than that. But the machine is so powerful and the money is so big that it's almost impossible to break free. Rita Hayworth was way ahead of her time in understanding how damaging this could be. She saw through the whole thing from the beginning. She knew that being called the love goddess wasn't a compliment, it was a cage. And she spent her whole life trying to get out of that cage, but she never quite managed it. Maybe the most heartbreaking thing about Rita's story is that she just wanted what most people want, to be loved for who she really was, not for some image someone else created. She wanted to be Margarita, not Rita. She wanted to be a person, not a goddess. But Hollywood had invested too much in the fantasy to let her be human. Today, when people talk about Rita Hayworth, they usually still call her the love goddess. Maybe we should remember her as Margarita Cancino, the dancer's daughter who loved books and quiet evenings at home. Maybe we should remember her as a woman who tried to stay human in a business that wanted to turn her into a product. Because that's really what Rita's story is about, the cost of fame, and what happens when the world decides who you're supposed to be instead of letting you figure it out for yourself. She paid that cost with her happiness, her relationships, and ultimately her sense of self. And all because some executives in Hollywood thought they could make more money selling a goddess than they could selling a person. Remember that the love goddess was really just a scared, lonely person who never got the chance to find out who she might have been if she'd been allowed to choose her own identity. That's the real story of Rita Hayworth, not the goddess, but the woman who hated being one.